Veterans get 1 day, and the LGBTQLM never-ending alphabet community gets an entire month?
Literally hundreds of more people, and probably thousands, will die because of this decision.
They're more comfortable using the word pan. It's a younger community, a newer term, and it highlights the fact that gender is irrelevant from who they're attracted to.
Candace Owens drops an interesting take on Pride Month, lefties freak out over a Supreme Court decision, Gen Z's job interview habits spark debate, and more insane LGBT nonsense on TikTok. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily series where I take on the craziest things from across the internet and across our politics from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and sticking around. We don't bite. We're building a great community here. And if you're a returning viewer, don't forget to hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now, before we get into our main topic for today, I want to show you guys a fan video that really warmed my heart that I received on TikTok yesterday. I mean, is she going to feel this way if we go see?
Real quick question for everybody. Have you ever seen a more punchable face?
Oh, I can tell this guy is a big fan of my work, and I just wanted to thank him for his support and monetize it as content. Do you guys think that I have a punchable face? Let me know in the comments. Up next, we've got to talk about Candace Owens, the right-wing media darling who, after going independent, is making waves yet again with her controversial commentary. She just spoke at a Turning Point USA event, and she had this to say about LGBT Pride Month.
It would be one thing if we sent our boys overseas and they came back and they were treated well. Look at the way they treat our veterans. Look at the way they treat our veterans. Look at the VA. It's a disaster. You mean to tell me that our veterans get 1 day and the LGBTQLM never-ending alphabet community gets an entire month? Really comprehend how disrespectful that is. Really comprehend what it really means when these journalists come at you and they ask you why you don't worship the LGBTQIA never-ending dyslexic agenda. That's why I'm getting dyslexia. This alphabet soup community.
So you guys know that I'm a critic of the modern Pride Month movement. I don't really support it. I think it's very counterproductive at this point, and I don't really participate. So I'm not a fan of Pride Month, but I'm also not a fan of cheap pandering and bad faith arguments from anybody. And that's the category that this Candace Owens commentary falls into. It is factually incorrect to say that veterans only get 1 day in our calendar. In fact, the month of May is both federally recognized and recognized in all 50 states as Military Appreciation Month. I understand that it doesn't get the same degree of public attention as Pride Month these days, but if Candace Owens, with her millions and millions of followers and massive influence, decided to not do anything in May to fundraise or help veterans or support them in any way, that's on her. That has nothing to do with the LGBT community. In the same way, using the treatment of veterans in this country, which I agree could be so much better than it is, to attack the LGBT community or to attack Pride Month is really strange and a bad faith attack. The poor state of veterans' healthcare isn't what it is because we pay attention to Pride Month in June. It's a failing of our government, it's our tax dollars being misspent, it's our political priorities being warped, but it has nothing to do with the LGBT community, and it's just like a cheap shot. And more than anything, I resent this commentary from Candace because it feels like she doesn't respect this audience very much, of these right-wing attendees at this Turning Point USA conference, or her audience more broadly that she's built up of right-leaning Americans. She's pandering to them with this cheap red meat that is factually incorrect and anyway just kind of a demagogical distraction. And by doing that, she's essentially saying she thinks she can rile you up, get attention, build her own brand, and that people aren't smart enough to realize that what she's saying is kind of ridiculous. I don't hold that view. I don't think that the average American in the America First movement or in the MAGA movement is low IQ. But Candace Owens' commentary and cheap pandering seems to think that is what she believes. That's just my take. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And now let's talk about leftists losing their minds over a recent Supreme Court decision. So the Supreme Court late last week struck down a Trump-era ATF, which is the federal agency that regulates alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, rule that banned bump stocks by executive fiat in America. Bump stocks, if you're wondering, are an accessory that firearms users can use to speed up the rate of fire of a semi-automatic firearm. It essentially helps them pull the trigger faster. Bump stocks were infamously used in the terrible Las Vegas massacre some years back, which is what prompted the ATF to put out this rule banning overnight these hundreds of thousands of devices that Americans own. That rule was challenged in court for reasons that will become very clear, and the Supreme Court just struck it down. Some commentators on the far left are not taking this well. Here's a clip of two hosts over at the Young Turks, John Idiarola and Cenk Uygur, absolutely losing their minds over this ruling and displaying their ignorance in the process.
Plenty of people are excited about this. Not all of them want to go on some sort of killing spree with these devices, but you have to imagine that if you do fancy yourself the next mass shooter, today is a particularly good day for you.
So what's gonna happen here? This is a stone cold fact. Literally hundreds of more people, and probably thousands, will die because of this decision. Because it's not like the mass shootings wouldn't have happened, they would still happen. And so in a mass shooting, you might have 7 people who die without a bump stock. With a bump stock, it's gonna be 70 or 17 or 27. If you're arguing that that's not gonna happen, you're being ridiculous. You could say, hey, I know that's gonna happen. I know thousands more people are gonna die because psychos are immediately gonna put bump stocks to turn their guns into rifles, etc., into machine guns. I know of course that's gonna happen. But I'm a jackass who likes to go in the woods and go, it's so much fun, so I don't mind if those thousands of people die. At least have the decency to be honest.
At least have the decency to be honest. I would humbly hold up a mirror to Mr. Uygur here and say, take your own advice. This is a wild and unhinged rant that displays a total lack of understanding about what bump stocks are, how they work, how often they're used in shootings, and what the Supreme Court ruling was actually even about. This case wasn't about the Second Amendment. It was about interpreting federal statutes and the separation of powers. Essentially, 10 times over the years, the ATF affirmed that a bump stock was an accessory. It wasn't a machine gun, which are banned under federal law. Then this terrible tragic shooting in Las Vegas happened where a bump stock was used. And overnight, they decided to reinterpret federal law to say that a bump stock was banned by the federal law banning machine guns, even though it's not a machine gun, and doesn't actually transform a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. It just speeds up the rate at which people can pull the trigger, but it's still one trigger pull, one bullet, which is the definition of semi-automatic, as opposed to automatic, aka machine gun, which is hold the trigger and it sprays bullets. And what's crazy about this is that Congress considered passing legislation after the shooting banning bump stocks, which is what you should do if you're actually going to ban them, is pass a law, not stretch old laws to do something they were never intended to do and the actual text of them doesn't do. But instead, under Trump, the ATF went rogue, attempted to rewrite federal gun laws via fiat with no input from elected representatives of the people, and took the decision out of Congress's hands. This was easier politically because then Congress could do away with this legislation and not have to worry about ruffling any feathers by passing controversial bills. But even at the time, many progressive Democrats admitted that the legal justification the ATF was relying on was bullshit. Here's a quote from former Senator Dianne Feinstein, a progressive from California, who at the time said that the proposed regulation hinged on a dubious analysis and that the gun lobby and manufacturers would have a field day with the ATF's reasoning in court. She said that legislation is the only way to ban bump stocks. So now years later, we have the Supreme Court saying no. Federal agencies can't create new laws out of thin air. If you want to ban bump stocks, you probably can, but you have to pass a law to do it. This isn't actually a Second Amendment case. It's a basic civics and separation of powers question. The Supreme Court is absolutely correct. And ironically, the conservative majority is ruling against Trump. The craziest part of all this is you have lefties like Cenk Uygur upset that the Supreme Court stopped Trump from acting like the dictator they always claim he wants to be and ruling via fiat, circumventing the democratic process and inventing new laws out of thin air and imposing them on the American people. The math isn't mathing. You're either worried about Trump being a tyrant or you want the president to be able to make up new laws by himself through federal fiat. It can't be both. At least, not if your goal is to make any sense. And the unhinged fear-mongering that you saw from the Young Turks guys in this clip is absolutely wild. First off, they make it sound like bump stocks are used frequently in mass shootings. That's not the case. It's hard to find examples of any mass shootings where they're used, in fact, other than this infamous Las Vegas one. And they're acting like the Supreme Court ruling means that bump stocks are going to be legal, but it actually doesn't. It just means that Congress has to do their job and actually introduce new laws if they want new laws to go into place. Congress can get together this week and pass a bill banning bump stocks. And then the Supreme Court wouldn't strike it down under the same analysis. Maybe it'd get challenged on Second Amendment grounds, but even then it might get upheld. But all they said with this ruling is, Congress, do your job. They didn't say that bump stocks must stay legal. But even if they did, this whole debate is freaking stupid. Because if you actually know anything about guns, and I don't know a lot, but I've done basic research. The same technique of bumping to speed up the rate of fire of a semi-automatic weapon can be done with a rubber band. It can be done just using your hand under a certain technique. You can learn how in a YouTube video in 10 minutes. Banning these accessories, which are almost never used in shootings anyway, and in fact, probably aren't even helpful in most shootings because they radically reduce your accuracy, does nothing to make the public safer. Unless you're also going to ban rubber bands. The whole thing is entirely pointless. I don't really care whether they get banned or not, though I care a lot about the proper constitutional order being upheld. But to claim that upholding our constitutional republic and its separations of powers means thousands more people will be mowed down in the streets is unhinged demagoguery with no basis in reality, no basis in fact, and it demonstrates a total ignorance of how firearms actually work and of the Supreme Court decision that they're melting down over. Of course, when I saw Cenk's commentary on this on Twitter, I hit him up and said, would love to debate you on this. But don't hold your breath waiting on him to take up that invitation. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button. Up next, we've got to talk about Gen Z, because if one new survey has anything to go by, they're not okay. Let's take a look at some coverage of Gen Z's job interview habits from Fox 26 Houston.
I am so confused by this story. I don't even know what to think of this. A new survey by online magazine Intelligent reveals nearly 20% of Gen Z applicants brought their mom or dad with them to a job interview? What?
They needed some help, I guess. I don't know. All right, here we go. A majority of employers say most college graduates, one, are unprepared for the workforce. One of the biggest reasons has to do with the interviewing process. Employers say younger candidates are struggling with eye contact, they're asking for too much money, and they're not dressing appropriately for the interview. 21% of employers say candidates also refuse to turn on their cameras for virtual interviews.
See, instead of sitting here, though, and saying things that I shouldn't say, I should make a video, because I feel like in our industry, we are actually in college taught how to dress and taught how to go into an interview and eye contact and communicate. And you see how we're both dressed right now? This is a good example of how to go to an interview, okay? If it's for like a fancier job, I guess. But if you're like interviewing for an amusement park or something, you can do like the khakis and the polo.
But come on, like, you're not turning the camera on for the interview? Like, if it's a Zoom, come on, you gotta at least turn the camera on.
And I would always say, just in any case, put shoes on and have the right pants on, even if it's on Zoom. You never know.
You never know.
Like, stand up and show me your best, like, I don't know, but just make sure you're prepared. You're like in pajamas.
Yeah, so don't do that.
So I want to clarify a couple things. This report didn't quite find that 20% of Gen Zers say they've brought parents to a job interview. It says that 20% of employers said they've had Gen Zers bring parents to a job interview. Those are pretty different numbers. And so I'll start by just offering the pushback that I don't think this is very common. I really don't. I'm not buying any polls or online surveys that suggest that it is an extremely common practice among Gen Z to bring your parents to a job interview. But it is a thing that happens. And I will absolutely say that if any person, Gen Z, or applied for an internship at my company or anything like that, and they brought their mom or dad with them, it's a no from me, dog. It's just you're clearly demonstrating that you lack the maturity or the independence to function in a role as you would expect a fully formed adult to do. And the notion that they would refuse to turn their cameras on in a Zoom interview is wild. But I'm not shocked that Gen Z is behind in some ways on some of these job aspects, especially the younger side of Gen Z, which was deprived of years of their formative years in education by our drastic, disastrous COVID restrictions and lockdowns. Of course, some of them are going to be developmentally stunted, and in this case, that's not entirely their fault. But what do you think? Have you had Gen Zers bring parents to a job interview? I'm not buying that that's common, but I know it is a thing that has happened, and it's still just wild to me. Let me know in the comments. And now, it's time for Brad vs. TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app and lose brain cells for your viewing pleasure.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Make sure you're subscribed and stick around, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now we're going to take a look at a video from the gay news guy on TikTok.
Gay news! Breaking gay news! Breaking gay news!
Who decided, in honor of Pride Month, to make a helpful video explaining once and for all the difference between bisexuality and pansexuality. Let's take a listen.
What's the difference between bisexuality and pansexuality? And at the end, why this is so controversial. First off, bi does not mean you like two genders, and pan does not mean you like all genders. The Bisexual Manifesto, which is the most critical piece of bi history, says that being bi means liking genders the same and different from one's own. That does not mean just two. So many bi people are attracted to all genders, and many are not, but gender typically does matter to a bi person. And pansexuality is attraction regardless of someone's gender, so gender doesn't matter at all. It's about their personality. Pan personality. So what's so controversial? First, many bi people think all pans are technically bi. Since being bi means liking all genders the same and different from one's own, all pan people fall into that category technically, and bi people feel that pansexuality may contribute to bi erasure. And many pans disagree, saying they're more comfortable using the word pan. It's a younger community, a newer term, and it highlights the fact that gender is irrelevant from who they're attracted to.
I can't keep up. We just watched a whole last 60 seconds supposedly explaining the difference between bisexuality and pansexuality and came out 0% closer to understanding the supposed difference. Look, there is no difference. There are two biological sexes in human beings with very rare intersex conditions that aren't relevant to this conversation. Bisexual people are people who are attracted to either one of these two sexes. It really is that simple. There is no meaningful difference between being attracted to either of the biological sexes or being attracted to people regardless of their biological sex. Those are two ways of saying the exact same thing. So to make up a new label and a new community is just stupid. You're just engaging in mental gymnastics to try and compete at the oppression Olympics because bisexual is too boring or old-fashioned or accepted. You need to be something new, edgy, and controversial, and cool, and online, and it's just stupid. It's dumb. And the more you overcomplicate stuff attached to the LGBT movement, the more you sabotage its acceptance by confusing people and bogging it down with additional unnecessary nonsense. Ultimately, I don't really care if people want to call themselves pan, knock yourself out, but I'm not going to pretend there's any meaningful difference between that and bisexuality. And I just find it so hilarious that these LGBT TikTokers can make videos like this, think they're educating the public, and not realize how hopelessly confused and addled their word salads truly are. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And now we'll round out today's show by reading a couple of your comments from the last episode. One person wrote, "What's the better activity for a 5-year-old? Chick-fil-A camp or a drag show?" That is funny because honestly, a lot of the types that were so mad about Chick-fil-A's child labor camp probably would take their kid to Drag Queen Story Hour, which ultimately I do believe that's their choice, but I can't relate. to their parenting or their value system. I simply cannot relate. Another person says they're complaining about child labor while using and owning products that are actually produced by child labor. That's a good point, honestly, and there's a disturbing amount of child labor that goes to some of the imported stuff that we do use. And I feel like these TikTok activists' energy and time would be better spent focused on that than on raging over Chick-fil-A's 3-hour summer events for kids. Exposing children to an environment where they can have fun and interact with people, teaching children the value of hard work? The horror. Yeah, I think you're onto something here, that the real reason that far left people seem to dislike the Chick-fil-A camp is because it kind of reinforces the idea that work ethic and enterprise are good things, and I think their values are fundamentally opposed to that. Another person writes, J.K. Rowling is like the Bank of England of writers. She may have haters, but she's too big to fail. Yeah, that's a funny way of putting it. I do think when you reach billionaire status, you're kind of uncancelable to a certain extent, like you're insulated from the same pressures. But it is concerning to see how intense the pressure campaign they can still nonetheless bring to bear against somebody as powerful and influential as Rowling is, because imagine how devastating that would be for people without her levels of power to push back. Another person says, as a non-American, I just don't understand why Americans love to get offended at every single thing. Yeah, it can be annoying, though I would stress to you that that is very online Americans. You go out and about every day in these beautiful United States, I don't think you'll encounter the same level of fragility and snowflakiness, at least not in many parts of the country. Another person says, hey Brad, I hope you pick my comment. I have a question for you, a non-serious one. Where do you stand on the sitting versus standing at concerts debate? For me, I stand during the energetic songs and sit during the slow, emotional songs. Honestly, I'm not a huge concert guy, and if I did go, and when I do go, if I could, I'd probably prefer to sit through a lot of it. But everyone else ends up standing, so then you kind of have to stand to even be able to see. Another person says, hey Brad, I know you're from Massachusetts like me, so I've been dying to ask, what are your thoughts on Greek pizza? I used to hate it growing up, but I find myself missing it now that I live elsewhere. Yeah, people who aren't from New England will probably have never had Greek pizza, but I like it. I'm not like insane about it, but yeah, I like it. All right, everybody, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, yada, 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 and we'll talk again tomorrow.